Now, I'm not one to gossip, but I will bring you the tea. Welcome to Chronicle Speaks.
Please, I don't have any time for any gossip now. Eh? Yes.
Look at you.
So as we all know, Diddy has been in the clanky for 3 weeks and he's been trying his best to get bail. There's been new attorneys. There's been a new judge. There's so much going on in the world of Diddy. Everything going on but that release from jail. Well, now his third attempt of getting bail has been filed and we have a new appeal. These attorneys are doing the job that he paid them to do and they are fighting dirty. They blame the abuse that happened to Cassie back in 2016 on both Diddy and Cassie being jealous of each other, being on drugs, and both of them cheating. But besides that, they had a loving relationship, child. And we are also going to talk about attorney Ariel Mitchell-Kidd, who states that Diddy chased her client with a knife, dousing her with oil, causing her body to become limp, making her defenseless. We are going to break this down along with the appeal. But before we do, please be sure to subscribe to this channel and hit the bell for notifications so you don't miss out on any news regarding this story and so much more. Now let's get back into it. So attorney Alexandra Shapiro is still in the picture after all, and she filed an appeal on Diddy's behalf, and baby does she fight dirty. In her defense, it's gotta be hard to try to clean up all of this mess that this man has made when there is so much evidence against him. However, the appeal has been filed and now it's up to the new judge to decide if Diddy is going to come home before trial. Let's get into this appeal. Introduction to Get Diddy Bail. Bail may be denied only in a rare case of extreme and unusual circumstances. This case does involve extreme and unusual circumstances, but none that typically foreclose bail or warrant forcing Sean Combs to defend himself from a prison cell. What is extreme and unusual about this case is that Mr. Combs was detained immediately after he was charged, even though he has been in the spotlight his entire life, with many of his purported antics and episodes being widely reported in the press and known to law enforcement authorities. Indeed, hardly a risk of flight. He is a 54-year-old father of 7, a U.S. citizen, an extraordinary successful artist, businessman, and philanthropist, and one of the most recognizable people on earth. The sensationalism surrounding his arrest has distorted the bail analysis. Mr. Combs was not released pending trial, even though he offered to comply with restrictive conditions that would have prevented any conceivable risk of flight or danger. The district court detained Mr. Combs in a conclusory, bare-bone oral ruling, apparently because of unspecified concerns that he would obstruct justice and intimidate witnesses. The government's argument about the risk of obstruction were based on speculation, resting mainly on untested allegations about communications with witnesses in civil cases and communications initiated by supposed witnesses and not Mr. Combs. The government even claimed his public denial of a former girlfriend's allegation in a civil lawsuit constituted attempts to obstruct justice. If denying accusations by civil plaintiffs could justify pretrial detention, the Liberties Protection of the Bail Reform Act and the Constitution, not to mention the First Amendment, would be meaningless. Throughout the bail proceedings below, Mr. Combs rebutted the government's proffers, but without fact-finding or analysis, the district court endorsed the government's exaggerated rhetoric and ordered Mr. Combs detained. In so doing, the court committed legal error, rejected a plainly sufficient bail package, and violated its obligations under the Bail Reform Act. Mr. Combs is presumed innocent. He traveled to New York to surrender because he knew he was going to be indicted. He took extraordinary steps to demonstrate that he intended to face and contest the charges, not flee. He presented a bail package that would plainly stop him from posing a danger to anyone or contacting any witnesses. Under the Bail Reform Act, liberty is the norm, and detention prior to trial or without trial is the carefully limited exception. Mr. Combs is entitled to release under the Federal Rule of Appellate Procedure and immediate release pending disposition of this appeal under Federal Rule of Appellate Procedure.
Not guilty. Come on.
Now they're going to present the following issues: whether the district court's obstruction and witness tampering conclusions lacked a factual basis and misapplied the law, whether the district court erred in conclusion no condition would reasonably assure the safety of any other person in the community, and lastly, whether the district court erroneously failed to make the factual findings required by the Bail Reform Act and weigh the required statutory factors. Now, in this background, they're saying that Diddy wanted the government to know that he was trustworthy and committed to prove his innocence. So in early 2024, he knew that he was going to be the target of a federal investigation. Nonetheless, he directed his counsel to proactively reach out to prosecutors. So months before Diddy was even indicted on March 13, 2024, his attorney reached out to the U.S. government's attorney and was like, look, I'm representing Diddy. We would like to speak. What's going on? They completely ignored him. So 5 days later, he reached out again and they ignored him again. But on that fateful day, March 25th, 2024, the government executed search warrants on both of his residences, the one in Miami and the one in Los Angeles. They also searched Diddy personally and they searched his airplane, and the council agreed to accept service of 2 grand jury subpoenas to Mr. Combs' businesses. So on April 1st, his attorneys took custody of his passport and let the government know he will not be leaving the country, he will not flee, and anywhere he needs to travel domestically, we will let you know. And 9 different times they let the government know that he was getting ready to travel. He's going here, he's going there, and they agreed to it. Diddy put his airplane up for sale. He paid $18 million on his home, which is worth $48 million, and he also surrendered the passports of not only his mother, but his 4 daughters as well. Diddy cooperated with the investigation, producing over 144 documents, and then he relocated to New York to surrender when he found out that he was likely to be arrested. Although he said he was going to surrender, they was like, nope, we want to get you. On September 16, 2024, the government arrested him on a 3-count indictment charging racketeering conspiracy, sex trafficking, and interstate transportation to engage in prostitution. The government claims the core of the case is a freak-off activity which allegedly involved elaborate and produced sex performances that Mr. Combs arranged, directed, masturbated during, and often electronically recorded. Mr. Combs believes the evidence will show that the extent such activities occurred, all individuals who participated were adults voluntarily engaged in consensual sex. Mr. Combs was arraigned on September 17, 2024 before Magistrate Judge Robin F. Tarnowski, and he pled not guilty. The government sought detention, arguing that Mr. Combs presented a risk of flight, danger to the community, and risk of obstruction and witness tampering. Despite Mr. Combs' robust bail proposal, Judge Tarnowski detained him. Mr. Combs appealed. The district court held a bail hearing on September 18, 2024. The court began by noting that the government primarily seeks detention based on a risk of flight and the danger of obstruction of justice or witness tampering. The court indicated that based upon the parties' written submissions, its lesser concern was risk of flight and its bigger concern dealt with the danger of obstruction of justice and witness tampering. The government's proffer focused on an 8.5-year-old domestic violence incident and vague allegations related to civil lawsuits. The government reiterated the indictment's allegations and only vaguely alluded to possible witness testimony and evidence, primarily relying on a widely publicized March 5, 2016 video of Mr. Combs depicting a domestic violence incident with a former girlfriend called Victim 1 in Count 2. The government also mentioned text messages and phone calls between Mr. Combs and potential witnesses, primarily witnesses in civil lawsuits filed against Mr. Combs. The government went so far as to argue that Mr. Combs' public statements that a civil lawsuit was riddled with lies were attempts by him to obstruct justice. Regarding the March 5, 2016 video, defense counsel explained that Mr. Combs and Victim 1, Cassie, shared a 10-year romantic relationship that was often mutually toxic. Counsel noted that countless written communications tend to negate any lack of consent and any coercion regarding their sexual activity, and cited evidence showing a long-term loving relationship that became strained by mutual infidelity and jealousy. The overwhelming written communications describing their consensual sexual relationship included communications concerning their mutual decision to bring a third party into their intimacy. The violence depicted in the March 5, 2016 video was entirely separate, stemming from jealousy from infidelity 8.5 years ago. Defense counsel cited interviews with half a dozen male escorts who participated in the freak-offs described by the government and confirmed they never witnessed anything remotely non-consensual. Counsel explained that Mr. Combs and Victim 1, Cassie, both suffered from serious drug problems at the time of the video and subsequently participated in rehab before eventually separating in 2018. Counsel further explained Mr. Combs' communication regarding Victim 1's November 2023 lawsuit. Years after the couple's separation, a lawyer representing Victim 1, Cassie, demanded a $30 million payment from Mr. Combs in exchange for the rights to a tell-all book Victim 1 had supposedly written. When Mr. Combs refused, Victim 1 retained new counsel, who filed a lawsuit which was quickly concluded with a large settlement. This prompted a torrent of other lawsuits. Although Mr. Combs communicated with others about the conduct alleged in these civil lawsuits, including individuals the government now characterizes as victims, at the time, he knew nothing about the Southern District of New York's investigation and was not engaged in any attempted obstruction. The government had no response other than to say Mr. Combs certainly suspected the possibility of an investigation, citing his statements he was not supposed to be speaking on the phone. Defense counsel also rebutted the government's other obstruction of witness tampering allegations regarding a civil lawsuit filed against Mr. Combs Combs on September 10, 2024. After the lawsuit was filed, Mr. Combs spoke with an individual the lawsuit identified as a prominent witness who was alleged violence. The individual in question was very upset about publicity and wanted to make a public statement that her personal experience diverged from the lawsuit's allegations. As counsel explained, this witness was represented by an attorney at the time of the communication and could be an important defense witness with whom the defense will likely continue speaking. Counsel further explained that Mr. Combs had, with counsel's blessing, called potential defense witnesses to let them know that counsel would reach out and speak to them. Notably, search warrant affidavits disclosed to the defense on October 7, 2024 confirmed blank, but during its proffer to the court, the government concealed this fact, which completely undermines its claim that the timing of these contacts with the witness in September 2024 suggests obstruction. Although the government vaguely describes contact with two grand jury witnesses, it proffered no evidence of any threats or intimidation. The government could only state that there were 14 total contacts between Mr. Combs and one witness and another witness who was contacted multiple times. Defense counsel explained these contacts involved no obstruction or witness tampering. For example, one witness contacted Mr. Combs, not the other way around. She reached out to Mr. Combs and told him, "I'm a grand jury witness." After Mr. Combs informed defense counsel, he was instructed not to contact the witness anymore and didn't. Of course, the defense explained it must continue to interview witnesses to conduct a reasonable defense investigation. So then they talked about everything Diddy tried to do to get bail. Now, he offered a $50 million bond that was co-signed by Combs and 7 family members secured by Mr. Combs' unencumbered $48 million home and his mother's home. Travel to be restricted to the Southern District of Florida and the Southern and Eastern District of New York to attend court, meet with counsel, and attend medical appointments. Home detention with GPS monitoring, providing Mr. Combs' passport to pretrial services, retaining the passport of 5 other family members, continued effort to sell Mr. Combs' airplane, and a restriction on bringing the plane to any district in which Mr. Combs is located, restricting all visitors to Mr. Combs' residence except family, caretakers, and friends not considered to be co-conspirators, with no female visitors except family and mothers of Mr. Combs' children, with a daily visitor log shared with the pretrial services, no contact with known grand jury witnesses, weekly drug testing by pretrial services, and all other conditions of pretrial supervision. During the hearing, counsel supplemented the package with the following additional conditions specifically designed to prevent any witness tampering or obstruction: 24/7 monitoring of Combs by a third-party security force, which is known as Sage Intelligence, which employs former federal and state law enforcement officers, no access to the internet, no phones, restrict visitor access to only a pre-approved list of visitors to be shared with the government, pretrial services, and the court. Video cameras monitoring of Mr. Combs if necessary. In addition, during the hearing, defense counsel repeatedly made clear Mr. Combs would accept any other conditions the court deemed necessary. Counsel offered to put together a protocol so that the court is absolutely satisfied and comfortable that there is quite literally no way that Mr. Combs would be able to conduct any type of contact, do anything with any witness of any nature. We'll do whatever needs to be done. We can have any protocol that Your Honor sees fit. We can do whatever Your Honor thinks is necessary. And we all know how that hearing ended because Diddy is currently locked up. The judge says, "I find that the government has carried its burden of persuasion by clear and convincing evidence on dangerousness both for obstruction and witness tampering, as well as danger more generally, even if the defense has rebutted the presumption of coming forward with their burden of production." So the appeal attorney writes, the court stated it need not reach flight risk. Court further stated the government has proven by clear and convincing evidence that there is no condition or combination of conditions that will reasonably assure the safety of a person in the community, as well that Mr. Combs will not obstruct justice or tamper with witnesses. The court rejected Mr. Combs' proposed bail package and adopted the government's argument that under the proposed conditions, the defendant would still have access to employees and other individuals and thus could obstruct justice and intimidate witnesses through those folks through even coded messages if necessary. The court made no finding of fact and provided no further indication why it concluded detention was necessary. On October 3rd, 2024, the case was reassigned to Judge Aaron Subramanian. So let's get into the argument of the appeal, but I am going to break it down in layman's terms that we can all understand without all of the case studies. So in the argument of the appeal, they're stating that the court has established that clear and convincing evidence of a serious risk of obstruction or witness tampering is necessary for pretrial detention. In Mr. Combs' case, the government did not present sufficient evidence to justify his detention, relying mainly on an old video and minimal witness contact that did not indicate threats or tampering. The defense provided a robust rebuttal to the government's claims, illustrating that the circumstances surrounding the video were misrepresented and that the alleged witness contacts were benign, primarily related to civil lawsuits predating the indictment. The defense argued that the government's evidence was implausible, lacking detail, and failing to demonstrate any actual intimidation or obstruction effort. Furthermore, the court misapplied legal precedents, comparing Mr. Combs' situation to cases with significantly more evidence of threats. The defense proposed a comprehensive bail package that included stringent monitoring and restrictions designed to mitigate any risk of obstruction, which the court dismissed without substantial justification. The district court also failed to consider all potential alternatives to detention and erroneously concluded that no conditions could assure Mr. Combs' appearance and community safety. Given the proposed bail conditions and lack of credible evidence against him, Mr. Combs should be released. I'm not sure if this is going to work or not, but I can say more of a fight is put up with this appeal than with the last one. Alexandra Shapiro is known for doing this, and she is very good at what she does, so we are going to have to see how this plays out in court. You know I will keep you abreast. Now let's talk about attorney Ariel Mitchell-Kidd. We spoke about her on my channel before. She once spoke about there being a tape out with another celebrity who was supposed to be bigger than Diddy, and this tape was being shopped all around Hollywood, and she wanted to make sure that she contacted that person to make sure that that video never saw the light of day, but that person would have to pay up in order to get that to happen. She also spoke about one of her clients who encountered Diddy at a friend's home. She said that Diddy took advantage of her, he used inanimate objects on her, and then she ended up having to run out of the home, and now she's suing. Now she is going to go into detail about Diddy attacking her client with a knife and squirting oil on this client to pretty much debilitate this client and make this client just limp. Take a listen to this.
So we know, Ariel, that you've got this client, you plan to file the suit this week. There hasn't been a lot of detail about it, but I think you can reveal a little more tonight about exactly what your client says Diddy did to her. Tell us a little more if you can, even though the suit's not officially been filed.
Yes, I'll have the suit filed sometime this week, probably in the next couple of days. It's just in editing right now, just to get the final touches on it, just to make sure we haven't missed any causes of action. I think as it stands right now, we're at 19 causes of actions, from sexual assault, sexual battery, of course, RICO charges, and sex trafficking. But essentially, my client was raped by Mr. Combs, his bodyguard, and a friend who invited my client to his home to set up this whole situation. The details are graphic in nature, and the complaint lays out all of the details in the graphic, just deplorable way my client was victimized in that day, or in that night rather, and her harrowing escape and how she was able to finally get away and manage to get to safety after the gruesome attack.
Yeah, and I know that the details are graphic, and I want to be careful, but can you talk a little bit about the baby oil? Because I think people just think it's baby oil, but you are claiming that there may be something else in that, correct?
Yes, so in the suit, there is a part where Mr. Combs is threatening her with a knife and makes her take off her clothes. And then he takes what she believes is some type of liquid substance out of a bag, out of a fanny pack to be specific. And he squirts it at her. And she originally thought it was like acid or something. But then she realized that it was some type of lubricant or oil. She actually didn't specify even baby oil. She just said he just started squirting it at her, squirting it all over her body. And then that's when, after she was covered in this oil, that's when the attack began with Mr. Combs and then the friend. And then in between the two of them, she was squirted some more with this oil. And then the bodyguard then attacked her and raped her as well. But she said over the course of this, her body gotten more and more limp, and she couldn't figure out essentially what was causing it, because it wasn't as if she was forced any drugs. She said she had a cup of water that she took a sip of, and she knew immediately it wasn't just water, but she only took a sip. and she felt that whatever the liquid was being squirted on her had something in it which essentially debilitated her and her faculties.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. I mean, because in the complaint, the Fed's complaint, they talk about all of those bottles of body oil. So we knew there was a lot of lubricant, but do you have any idea what may have been in it? Is there something that could have been in it that would have made it so she couldn't move?
So I've done some internal research after I had my intake with my client, and it seems that oil in general is used as a conduit for specific drugs, like for instance, GHB. So in order to get that to topically take into somebody's body, you need a conduit, which is typically oil. So it seems to me that there were some types of drugs mixed into the oil, which is why he was dousing her in that oil prior, not only to make it easier to assault her, but that was what was lowering her defenses.
These cases are becoming too much to deal with and keep up with. It's just a lot at this point. You don't know who to believe and who not to believe. But what I need to do is hear from you. What do you think about Diddy's appeal? Do you think he will be granted bail? Leave a comment, and you know how we do. We'll talk about it down below. Talk to you guys later. Bye. Once again, thanks for watching. Before you go, don't forget to subscribe to this channel, hit the like button, and hit that bell so you don't miss out on any of my new episodes.